GM Growth Fam, time for another episode. Today, I think I have a personality. I don't have a guest. And I'll tell you why. Because you look at somebody's career and you think, yeah, this is step one, this is step two, this is step three. That's how generally careers go. But what do you do with someone that's a brilliant storyteller? You never give them a generic, hey, here's the resume, here's the first career, second, third, fourth. That's not what you do. You tell a story. So today I have with me somebody who, from let's take 2016 as an example, spent time with presidential candidates on the trail, where probably one of the most circumstantial elections of our time was taking place real time. He spent time on the road talking to those presidential candidates. And now he's the CMO of Arc Network, which I personally feel is going to be a game changer for Bitcoin DeFi. So Nick, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. And I love that intro because, a lot of my career, and I think I would suspect a lot of people in this space, a lot of it was serendipity and just going where opportunity took you, man.
That's awesome. That's lovely. So Nick, let's talk about where it all started. I really want to know, because you are a founder of a company called Scalable Storytelling, which is quite a purposefully juxtaposed name, might I add. But it's interesting because nobody calls a company Scalable Storytelling. So I really want to know, what is the story from your personal life that led you to becoming a storyteller? Because that's how I see it personally.
I love that. And that's exactly, how I would describe myself too, because, in the past I was a journalist. I spent a decade as, reporter, did everything from sports to, like you said, covering the presidential campaign trail, former Washington, D.C. correspondent, interviewed presidents and senators, CEOs, scientists, hog farmers in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and hookah shop owners in Arkansas. Great experience as a journalist, but at the heart of it, I was a writer and a storyteller that kind of led me into that. And then what also led me into marketing and ghostwriting for some of the top VCs in crypto, as well as a ton of startups. I mean, there's too many to name, but really helping founders and helping people communicate to audiences their value and their purpose in a way that feels congruent and meaningful to them. That is at the heart of what I do across all these spectrum of careers. I think that's been one blessing I've really had is from early age, I've kind of known that that was my skill set, my strength, and my purpose. And before we go into my whole backstory, which I'm happy to do, I think it's important to let, the people listening to this podcast and, listening to you kind of understand why does this even matter? Because I'm just some guy who's done some things. I've had some success. I've helped some companies grow into their full potential. But at the end of the day, why should you care? That is the most important thing. I would really urge anyone who's thinking about marketing or just starting a company to think about. It's not about you. It's about, what do your customers care about? And why should they care about what you're offering? Right. And so if we back up real quickly, and then I'm happy to talk all about my life story. Why do you even care about Nick Fouriezos' life story? Well, why do you even care about marketing in the first place? Since that's what this podcast is about. I think not every founder should care about marketing. That might sound like a crazy thing to say from a marketer, but I don't think founders should care about marketing. I think what they should care about is what great marketing can actually unlock for them. So what's that? Great marketing and learning how to do it for yourself. The reason why you listen to a podcast like this is that marketing in an authentic way is the key unlock to growing your clients. It's the key unlock to growing your capital. And it's the key unlock to growing your community. And I've seen this happen over and over again, helping early stage founders, mid stage founders go from seed to Series A and beyond at multiple places. Good marketing helps you fully understand early on who your real customer is, so you don't waste months of time and money chasing the wrong customer. And trust me, as a business owner, I've done it myself, right? It helps you to attract the type of audience that you're dreaming of instead of a community that will absolutely make your life a living hell. If you attract the wrong type of people because your marketing is off, I promise you, it doesn't matter how many followers you have on Twitter, you will despise having to answer to each one of them. And I think the secret isn't doing all these kind of awful strategies you see in this space. We see so many of them. It's not scamming people. It's misleading. It's not misleading them. It's not coming up with some viral, that all chasing virality works for a day and it feels great. And then you get bored with it. It's definitely not paying a bunch of KOLs to show your product into oblivion. The reality is that if you truly have a great product that actually helps the people you are talking to, then great marketing becomes as simple as just having really great education. It's just about telling people that you see them and you know how to help, right? So marketing's just like super simple thing on paper. And I think the worst marketers try to complicate it. I think that the worst founders try to complicate their businesses rather than simplify them. My job as a marketer and as someone who cares about your business is to actually simplify things and make things clearer for you so that you don't wake up anxious thinking there are 13 routes to take and I need to take all of them. Simplicity is your friend. And it's very difficult to do yourself as a founder because, again, like you don't have experience doing this. You've maybe only built this business once. We've only lived once. And there's so much bad information out there. Like you listen to all these podcasts, you see it. There's so many conflicting opinions. There's so many wolves in sheep's clothing. And they will absolutely, I've seen so many marketers who love marketing and don't love substance. And worst of all, they don't love helping people. And they will try and take advantage of you, especially if you've gone and raised like a Series A already or raised some money. So that's why I think people should care about this conversation in the first place, and why they should even care about me is, they should care about marketing, and it's because of those things: clients, capital, community.
And I couldn't have put that better myself. That's why I call you Storyteller. I think Nick's being too humble. Let me give you a few names of projects that Nick's worked with. I want to hype him up slightly more. But obviously, Nick's been involved in raising almost close to 100 million.
I've written white papers for companies like Brain Trust, which raised $100 million, and we grew our community from 7,000 to 700,000 the day we launched the white paper. But we raised $100 million within 3 months. My second white paper I ever did, Flipside Crypto, we raised $50 million off of that. The current company that I'm chief marketing officer for, Arch Network, we just announced this week our Series A raise with Pantera. That was for $1 million. And doing that foundational leadership content, helping the founder find their voice, helping with pitch decks, and creating all the content and the messaging around that. I've been involved with everyone from Variant Fund, Consensus Mesh, Filecoin, as well as some of their names. Really enjoyed this space and helping these companies realize their potential.
What's been the most, let's say, fascinating story of your multiple years that you spent writing stories?
I mean, obviously, like the experience of being on the campaign trail twice, actually. I covered the presidential campaigns in the US in 2016 and 2020. Like, that was unbelievable. Some of my favorite interviews, from Trump to, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang. That was fun. Just really. And the key was my job, because I worked for a magazine and I got published and co-published like New York Times, Washington Post, USA, all those places. But what was really fun about it is I was mostly a profilist. So my job was to get to the heart of the matter in an hour with someone and, help them understand themselves and share that with me in a way for my audience. And when you're working with politicians, man, especially at this level, everything in their, like, I don't blame them for it, but everything in their career up until that moment has trained them to be more isolating, to be more internal, to share things, but only share things that they think are going to help them, to not be their real authentic selves. And so my job actually was to, within a very short period of time, you only have like an hour with them, maybe at best, or 30 minutes, to get you're never going to get a full character sketch of someone in that time, but just get one true, authentic thing from them. And there were a million different ways you could do that. But at the heart of it, it comes down to just really understanding how people think and work, and especially people at that level, and then being able to make them feel at ease and use your authenticity to draw that authenticity out of them. And I would argue that the very act of marketing has to be very similar. And let's be honest, especially for crypto companies, especially for tech startups early on, you're not just marketing. Actually, I wouldn't say very often are you at all marketing to a larger audience. You're really marketing to an audience of one. And in the beginning stages, that audience of one is usually investors. And I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's better to be honest about that than to pretend otherwise. And what I found from being in the room with the Mitt Romneys of the world and the major CEOs, Daniel Lubetzky of Kind Snacks and Mark Cuban and all these people, is understanding what they think about, how they think, and what they care about, and then being able to work with founders to communicate in a way that investors like that really value. So that's been a lot of the value that I've been able to bring in my career is and I guess going back to your original question, what are some of my favorite interviews or stories? I'd say the whole experience of covering the campaigns, but really, I actually spent a year on the road after the 2016 election. And I launched this project called States of the Nation, where we were coming out of this election that many people in the world and in America felt divided people, where people didn't trust their neighbors or feel like they understood their neighbors anymore on both sides. And I said, look, I want to spend a week in every state in the country writing stories about people and who they are and what they care about and getting outside of the Beltway politics. And in doing that, I really discovered that people, as much as like on a broad level, you're like, okay, people are like this, people are like that. Democrats are like this, Republicans are like this. What I found is actually like we're not a land of reds and blues, but we're more a land of many multiple hues, those colors in between. And so you'd be so surprised by the people who'd be like on one side of the issue, they'd be this, but then on another issue, they're like completely opposite party. And I think when we're marketing and storytelling and communicating our business goals or our ideas to the world, we have to understand that there's power in accepting these like strange nuances of both your business and your own personality. Joe Rogan is the most popular podcaster in the world, obviously has had huge success. And if he was just competing as a UFC, speaker, podcaster, there are better ones out there, right? There are ones who stay more on topic, who understand the sport even better, whatever, right? But he is someone who will talk about that. He'll talk about aliens. He'll talk about conspiracy theories. He'll talk about like just being, a human being, about science. Now, like I personally don't listen to him. He isn't my cup of tea, but it's that combination of interest that it really attracts the kind of people who love him. And so I think, it's a good lesson for you as a founder or someone who's creating content or marketing in general as a company, is that there's power in all these like weird combinations stuff that don't seem like they should go together. And so you should be able to communicate that.
No, absolutely. And actually, it's interesting. I did this video a little while back on how like a RAD system needs to be built to almost be schizophrenic in nature, where it's taking context from various different topics to be able to produce content that feels more human. But that's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. And then obviously, spent a lot of time almost building stories for companies. Obviously, you're a founder of a company called Scalable Storytelling.
That's right.
One, I do want to ask you, like, why that name first?
Absolutely.
I know we mentioned this offline, but I do want to know. And secondly, what's a practical framework that any founder can follow that has a tech product that wants to build a story around their brand?
Absolutely. So great question, first of all. Scalable storytelling was my way of putting the focus where it needs to be on, which is on storytelling and not like marketing or advertising. Everything is really just about what's the story you tell the world and also what's the story you tell yourself. And the scalable part of it is interesting because when I share that with people, obviously in tech, that denotes a certain amount of the ability to take something small and to scale it to a larger business, to a larger audience, and to construct things intentionally in a way that they don't break at each stage, right? That's what scalability in tech, especially on the operations side, is. But the key hack or secret to scalable storytelling, it's in those processes, which is what I teach founders. And like at Arch Network, I've specifically put in a content system that can scale with time. But it's also about creating a story and narrative that is authentic and congruent with yourself so that you don't have a problem scaling it as you and the company grow. So what do I mean by that? We talked a little bit about Donald Trump. In our conversation, we also talked about how like some of the best marketers in the world, are people like Elon Musk, Trump, these very polarizing figures on some level, but also people who they aren't afraid to, kind of operate and communicate in a way that they're very clear about what they are for and what they're not for. And a helpful analogy here is that great marketing acts like a magnet, right? Some people might have heard that before and they always think of, oh yeah, like you're trying to attract customers, so it's a magnet pulling them in. And that's part of it, yes. And the more clear, unfiltered, and like specific you are in your magnetism, in your communication of who you're trying to reach. So none of the jargon, none of the bullshit, none of the like trying to be everything for everyone. No, like the clearer you are, the stronger your magnetic pull is. But here's the other thing that people forget is that magnets, they repel, they push away just as much as they attract. A really strong magnet will throw something across the room that is diametrically opposed to it, right? That's how polarity works. And that is a good thing in marketing Because if you're doing that, you're probably also really heavily passionately attracting, a certain type of customer as well. You want to make sure that the magnetic pull you set is the type of customer you want. But that's the balance. That's like the key. That's the secret. So when I talk about scalable storytelling, the reality is that you are constantly telling a story to others and to yourself. And that shows not in the words you say, but actually in your complete body language. Human mind is evolutionarily designed to suss out danger, which oftentimes manifests as dishonesty. And it wasn't trained using language because language didn't exist for a large portion of our history. It was trained in body language, right? In the way that your face moves, your hands move when you talk. And so you can tell if someone is overthinking things, if they're saying one thing, but totally actually feel something else internally. It's so obvious. We know in seconds. It's the same with your marketing. So if you're going to have a scalable storytelling, you have to work on yourself, your mindset, and your business's clear values and mindset first. And then from that, you have to make sure that you're actually really honest with yourself and even the ugly sides of yourself. Get honest about that first. Figure out what you're for and what you're against on a true, authentic level. And then you will never have to worry about trying to scale a message that you yourself don't believe in. And that is extremely hard. The scalability comes from the ease because I don't have to think about what I'm about to say to you here. These are just like me speaking from my body based on me doing the work to understand myself first and then to be able to communicate it. So there's no need for me to put on airs or to fake it, or I can just communicate with you here and share that with you. And that's what I train founders to do. And what I've found, the cool thing is that playbook works for everybody as long as they go through that process and are willing to honestly look at themselves. And if they're willing to go that far, it is the thing that naturally attracts the right type of clients, the right type of investors, the right type of capital, and the right community that you'll actually be happy serving.
That makes a lot of sense. Have you also, like, every founder that I'm sure you've spoken to, I speak to, is almost obsessed with getting PR placement, right? I want to be featured in XYZ.
I am laughing so hard right now.
I want to be featured in X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, yeah, that totally makes
So
sense.
this is why. Sorry to interrupt you here, but I just
No
want to go
worries.
on a rant here because this is one of the biggest mistakes I see with early stage companies, but also even medium stage. Fun story. Well, first of all, one, obviously my career as a journalist, like I've worked with a lot of PR professionals and some of them are amazing. And I'm not saying that there isn't, if I'm saying like, oh, it's not worth getting placed somewhere, I'm actually saying like, oh, journalism doesn't matter that much, right? And that's not what I'm saying. But there is a certain amount of founders don't understand what the purpose of that is and the role it actually plays. And also they don't fully understand the numbers about what actual conversions that gets because being on the journalist side and having written these articles and seeing the numbers, like these are not like direct conversion type things. That is not the key to unlocking your business. Getting placed in Fortune or Forbes, and, Arch Network, like we just, announced our Series A and I was able to, make placements in all the major outlets. But like that is something that comes later in the cycle of a business. And the story I'll tell you is I actually, about a year ago, I came onto Arch to write the foundational documents. They just raised a $7 million seed. I wrote their white paper. I wrote all their foundational documents. And then I came on as their CMO. And very early on to me being CMO, one of our, investors came to me and said, hey, like you really need to talk to this PR company. Like they're really amazing. And I think that you should bring them on. And I was like, just for context, it's April now. This was back in like August of last year. And I remember telling her, I'll talk to them, look forward to it, but PR isn't what we need now. And she was like kind of shocked. She's like, wait, like really? Like I've never had like a CMO just be like straight up, like just tell me something like that. It's like, no, because like right now we are like way pre-product. Arch Network is a layer one programmability solution. And like, we had just raised a seed like a few months before, like the tech was nowhere near ready. We hadn't launched on testnet. It's like I went into that PR conversation, the agency was great. We actually ended up hiring them, about 2 months ago, and they've been great as we've gone from testnet and we're nearing mainnet now. We've gotten great coverage with them. They're fantastic. But getting a PR company like that too early, where it's like $12K a month and like, doing that for like 4 or 5 months would have been a complete waste of money, would have not led to any results that would be useful to us. And people don't understand too, like when you market, you have to bring people in, but you want to point them to be able to do something, right? And if you don't have anything for them to do, then you're not only wasting that attention, you're actually wasting their time, and that creates a negative sentiment down the line. So one thing that founders can really help themselves with, whether it's someone like me, whether it's some other, CMO or like, fractional CMO, some marketer, someone who just has experience, is you think you know what you want. We need PR, we need placement, we need to be in the news, whatever. But what you actually want is a successful business. And good marketing happens at stages, and you install the right piece to solve the right problem at the right time. Elon would never try to, put a wing on a spaceship when it doesn't even have an engine yet, right? Like it starts there, and that I probably just butchered that analogy, but you get what I'm saying. Essentially, there's stages at which every piece makes sense. And unless you've been through this process, unless you know how storytelling, narrative building, and human nature works and have done it for multiple organizations, it's very easy for you to assume like, oh, just do this. It's like, no. It's not do anything and everything. It's do the right thing at the right time for the right person.
So then how do we, I'm going to ask an impossible question, but
please. I love impossible questions. They're my favorite.
How do we make founders stop caring about PR placements very early in their development journey? But I think more importantly, what I want to understand is, let's say as a founder, as a company, maybe you're at a stage where you don't really know whether you need PR or not. Because I think that's a larger question, because after a fundraise, it's obvious, right? You want placements, you want people to pay attention to you. After a mainnet launch, it's obvious. Okay, you want to spread the word out there. But I see so many founders struggling with the fact that, okay, I don't really know whether I need PR right now or not, because I want to make a big splash, right? I want everybody to know my name, know my company's name. Some of it also becomes sort of like an ego thing. Like, hey,
it's absolutely partly an ego thing. Yeah,
like,
no, for sure.
Part of that is that, but like, is there a perfect time for somebody to look at PR placements when they, let's say, after a big announcement's obvious, but like, where else does a placement make sense?
I'm actually going to pause that question for a second because I'm going to answer your initial question, because I think it was a far more interesting one, which is how do you make founders understand that that's not what they need right now? Right. And one, I don't make anyone do anything or understand anything. This goes back to the difference, I think, between a great salesperson and a good salesperson, or a great marketer and a good marketer, which is that good marketers or good salespeople might, through force of will, try to force someone to believe as they do, or to make a sale, to come to your platform. A great one educates, informs, and lets people choose for themselves whether that is congruent to them. But here's the key: they do it out of a place of deeper love. And what that means is that I am going to push back against your bad assumption. I am not going to just tell you what you want to hear, or just give you what you think you need, when in reality you actually need something else. There's something called the waterfall of whys. Let's get like real specific and tactical here. Okay. When I look at a web page, right, and I see, okay, who is this actually for, right? Who is this product trying to say they're for? Okay. Then they say like what they're doing. And my first question is like, hey, why do I care about that thing? So if they say something like, let me give an example. We do your content marketing for you, right? I'm like, okay, that's fine. But all you did is tell me what you did. Why do I care? Why do I want, my content marketing? Well, it's like, because you want to have more reach. It's like, okay. But like, I also, why do I want more reach? Well, I actually want more status. I want more influence. I want to be able to change the world, right? And so the waterfall of whys helps you understand like what's really at the heart of here. So if a founder comes to me and they say, well, we really need to get placed somewhere, we really need like an article. I'm like, cool. Like, what would that solve for you? Like, why would that help? What do you think that would do? It's like, oh, we'll do this and this. Okay, interesting. So it would get your voice out there. It would get attention. Okay, interesting. Why do you want attention? Because like, it's good to have attention. It's good to have someone knowing a product. Okay, but you don't have a product yet, right? Or, at this stage, right? What are those people? Let's say this is a huge success and like, a bunch of people read this article. Okay, great. What are they going to do? What are you going to direct them to? You have nothing. Okay. It's not that being known is bad. In fact, I think being known is a huge part of the human experience and also the business experience. It's just that if you're going to like, what's the payoff if you're going to spend a lot of money on making that happen versus focusing on building your own organic content, audience and spreading the news that way, getting to know your target customer better. And this is where, I think of like certain things that like people make, biggest marketing mistakes people make is they focus on what they want people to know instead of what people want to know from them. Let me give you, I guess, like a clarification on that, right? Essentially, they're focused on their own needs to be known, their ego, their desire for their business to be famous, whatever, rather than focusing on their customer needs. And so if I am focused on what my customer wants to know from me, then I'm thinking about what information can I give them that will help them improve their lives, improve their experience, whatever issue that I'm solving as a business. And so people pay lip service to this idea, especially in startup land, oftentimes, because they've heard the quotes that say, like, think about your customer, all this stuff, right? So they go through the mimicry of it. But what they really want is status. They want to raise capital. They want to be seen as a success. And those are all human things. I don't judge them for it. But the way to get those things is not by pursuing those things, just like the pursuit of happiness does not give you happiness. Okay. The way to get those things is by obsessively caring about people and looking for ways to serve them. And who understood this more than anyone was Steve Jobs. Okay. Obviously a great marketer, but he was also someone with a huge ego. I mean, you hear the early stories of him, and it's like he saw the world a certain way and wanted to bend the universe to his vision of it, right? And this is the key, though. He had that ego. He wanted that success, but it wasn't what he pursued. He pursued the customer first. There was no one who was a bigger advocate for the customer to the point where he alienated a lot of people, but he was a huge customer advocate. And he actually described marketing as this. He said, with marketing, the goal is to get so close to your customers that you tell them what they need well before they realize it themselves. And so out of a deeper love for a founder, I would also tell them what they need well before they realize it for themselves, which is you don't need PR to solve this ache in your soul or your business. You actually have this business need. Let's focus on solving that first.
I think I can just sit here and listen to you for hours. But
I know that waxed a little poetic. I am a writer at heart, but there is a lot of tangible ways that you could isolate what the actual business need is. And this is the other fun thing about marketing is that the reason why people should care about marketing, especially founders, is that if you do the marketing first, the marketing exercises, the like workshops and discovering who your true customer is and what pain you're trying to solve for them, and you really nail that down, then you will save yourself so much time and money that you would have spent trying to appeal to everyone and you totally missed the mark. And I'll be honest, we experienced this a bit at Arch. We thought that the developers that we were trying to reach were like this type of background. We spent 6 months like doing a whole BD operation around them. Like we weren't clear enough in our target customer. And it was only later that we realized, oh, those people who are like general developers, like they do not integrate well with our ecosystem. It's very hard for them to do it. But if you get a Rust developer from the Solana ecosystem, but someone who wants the opportunity of being able to build on Bitcoin like you can with Arch, those people are huge success. And so we actually changed our entire business strategy. And thankfully, like that's how business works. Sometimes you live and you learn and you get more knowledge about your customer. But if we had done that hard thinking earlier in the process, then we would have saved ourselves a lot of time and money, literally 6 months of it where we could be even further ahead.
You've been behind so many fundraisings and so on and so forth, right? Like what's the best piece of advice and the worst piece of advice that you see within startup fundraising that maybe you have faced, maybe you've heard about? What's the best and what's the worst?
I would say the best is some form of the advice of you want 100, really truly passionate people rather than 1,000 non, or you want 1,000 of them rather than 100,000. And you want to spend time with those people and you want to live, breathe, and eat with those people, live, breathe, and eat. And this is why it's important not to have ego when you're building a business and when you're marketing, because you have to actually put yourself in their lives and be willing to live that way. Right. I always tell founders, like, find out who your target customer is and then find out where they spend all their time. Where do they live? And by live, usually these days, I mean live digitally. It's like what newsletters, what LinkedIn. And it's so funny because this relates to fundraising a bit, because if you really want an investor to notice you and to like have a level of familiarity with you before you even send your deck, many of these investors, not all of them, but many of them have podcasts they're trying to do regularly, newsletters, Twitter profiles with 300 followers, and they don't get any validation in those areas. They're trying to put their words out into the world, but they aren't getting likes. They're not getting that many comments. If you just like put a Twitter alert and a LinkedIn, track them on LinkedIn and literally be that person who is always commenting things like positive, high value, obviously. If you do that, it is the craziest thing. We live in a world where like it used to be like kings and paupers and the pauper can never talk to the king, right? These are the days where like you can have these massive VCs worth like tens, hundreds, millions of dollars, and you are the person that they see in their comments on Twitter and it makes their day. And so that's part of it is like figure out who your core audience is. And sometimes you'll find out that your core audience is actually 100 or 1,000 people, and you don't need to market to everybody. Some services, like a $5 SaaS product that's like meant to be like a calendar app or something, you have to reach everybody to make the scale work. But if you're doing B2B or if you're doing certain crypto market stuff, like, there's one company I'm talking to right now where like, they're going to have a yield product for validators, right? You know how few like large validator groups there are out there that are like really successful? Like that's like 100 to 1,000 like really good ones. It's in a specific ecosystem too. So you can literally like look up online who these like 100 people are, reach them and you win. So like marketing at that strategy just becomes market to one, literally hand fighting and making sure your messaging backs it up. Now, worst advice, fake it till you make it. Absolutely. Fake it till you make it is the worst marketing advice because of everything I said earlier, which is like evolutionarily, we are trained to suss out bullshit because it's a safety issue. And so when you do that, you may win in the short term at times, but everyone kind of knows what you're doing, especially in this space, and you will not win in the long term. I don't think you can be a good marketer or company that's trying to do good marketing and successfully fake it till you make it.
It's really interesting to think that so much of, especially within crypto, it becomes about puffing your chest up almost, right? Like I feel like so many projects, especially on their Twitter, I know marketers have talked to death about this, but I really feel like it still needs to be nailed down on the head is the fact if you go and read the Twitter bios of maybe 80% of the projects within the space, you will not be able to understand what they're doing. I've been in crypto for 7 years. I've read maybe close to 200 white papers. I still cannot understand half the time what is on, like what a project's trying to do, what it's trying to achieve, and it's who it's speaking to. Like, and I feel like a lot of that goes back to the ego point, which is really interesting that you stated that. But I
Yeah,
also want to
well,
know
let me
because
let me actually jump on that because you said something really interesting there, right? Two things. One, you said there's a lot of puffing up, and two, you can't understand what it is they're actually doing. They actually stem again from like founders or companies like wanting you to know what they want you to know, rather than wanting to find out what it is you need from them, right? And that's actually where I think I've built a reputation where, I think if I have been successful, it's been because, listen, what's cool about tech, what's about crypto is that people, especially the devs, especially like the CTO, like they understand how they're changing the world with what they're building. They just have a trouble articulating that to a larger audience sometimes, right? And so like my job is to be that translator of purpose to a larger audience, is to take all this like really cool technical thing that you've done and find a way to help people understand how it helps them, right? And if you can do that, then you will have impact and people will be attracted to it. But people do have a stubbornness sometimes, I think. Not everyone, but people where it's either the chest pop thing where it's more about like, thinking that you have to act cool in order to be successful in crypto, or the second thing, which is they're actually kind of stubborn about just wanting to be right rather than be successful. And so you'll get in arguments over like esoteric, very like little nitpicky things about the wording. In like making sure it's like a cryptographic X-ray, VM compute, like using all these words combined together that mean nothing, but like mean something to a technical mind in the individual. And it's letting go of your ego and saying, you know what, like not everything has to be like this super complex technical thing. You can actually simplify and have more success that way. And you have to learn to love, actually communicating to people more than being right. And I think that's an ego thing as well.
no, absolutely. And anybody who understands that is able to surge ahead. Like I remember having this
Absolutely.
conversation with a founder who was describing what his startup does, right?
Yeah.
And they had a different target audience. but their product was more suited for a completely different type of audience.
Yeah.
Right. And almost like a one-line shift. And so like they described the product to me and I was like, okay, so you're selling to X. And they were like, no, we're selling to B. I'm like, you're so off. And if you did this, and if you did the shift, not only would you be more exciting and interesting, not only to users, but to VCs, the people that you
Yeah.
actually want to raise money from. Because so many of the times, I think people get the perception wrong that VCs want novelty from a technical standpoint, which is not true. Like a VC can be extremely technical, understand what
Yeah.
you're building, your documentation, so on and so forth. But that's not what they want to see on the first sort of impression basis. They want to see novelty that anybody can understand because they understand, like, okay, you don't have to market this, but it needs to be simple enough for a larger audience to be able to make sense of it. And that's how they will back it. That's why I wanted to ask you, like, because you said you wrote the white paper for Art Network, so on and so forth. Like, how did you ensure that it seems more appealing to a larger audience than the general Bitcoin enthusiast?
Interesting. That's not where I thought you were going with that question. Because actually, I think what we did successfully is the opposite. Like when I say that, what I mean is that I think we understood at the beginning, especially when we wrote the white paper that we originally launched back last July, that we weren't trying to appeal to everybody, that we weren't trying to reach the general audience, that we were trying to reach specifically the person who loves what Bitcoin was, but also loves what Bitcoin can become. And so just for people who don't know, Arch is execution platform that allows you to do faster, more performant, more liquid programmability directly on the Bitcoin base layer in a way that doesn't require bridging or wrapping assets. And that's the key unlock. That's what makes it very different, that last part, because you had all these like Bitcoin L2s that were emerging and they built off this narrative that was emerging about how like having Bitcoin as a base layer with some of the new technology that was coming out could be interesting, but they didn't understand what Bitcoiners really want, which is, security of Bitcoin. They also want the liquidity of Bitcoin, it being a $2 trillion market that is basically just sitting there in like a checking account, right? And like you can have savings accounts in every other chain, but you can't on Bitcoin. You can't earn basic yield. You can't do things with it other than just transact it. You can't like do stocks, perps, whatever, right? And what made Arch successful, and we've built out our community to over like 600,000 across our channels. Like, it's an ecosystem that's still Bitcoin programmability is still relatively small, but we've got tons of apps building on us, and of course the successful raises. What really allowed us to kind of own this market and this niche is to know that we were speaking to Bitcoin people who wanted to do more with their Bitcoin, and we weren't speaking to the rest of the world to start. So like I actually took my team through an exercise on this when we were doing our messaging and really rethinking our brand and who we serve, right? And you saw Solana, which is like fast for everyone and performant for developers or something like that, or easy for developers. I think it's a tagline like that. Point is that they are talking essentially to everyone. But the difference is that they have earned that right. They are at that stage, right? The early days of Stripe, for example, Stripe's core audience, like you see them on business websites, you see, whatever. Like the core audience were the devs who were being hired to integrate payment services for these businesses because the devs saw such an easy API thing that they used to have to build out and like it was really expensive and time consuming. Oh, you can just like, use Stripe and do it like instantly. Like, and then they're telling all their friends how easy it is. That was their core audience. And Stripe made themselves first the best place for developers to access payment services, like the best, easiest integrations, right? And that allowed them to be the dominant payment service for like all business online, right? It's finding your core niche audience, the people and here's how here's like a practical thing. Here's how like who the audience that you serve most is. It's somewhere in between who do you help the most with your product, with your service, whatever. And let's see, who do you create the most value for? Who can you actually reach? Are they reachable, right? Because you might be able to really help them, but if you can't reach them, it doesn't matter. Can they actually pay for your service in a sustainable way, right? So it's like a mix of all those things because, if someone's trying to serve like the newspaper industry, love newspapers, start out newspapers, like been working on a lot of them, but you can own 50% of the market one year. You can win successfully getting 75% market share and still be losing money from the previous year because the print market, publication market is just going down. So you can do everything right and still lose if you pick the wrong audience, right? And pick the wrong market. So I would just say getting very clear on who your highest value customer is through that prism of those three things. Who can you actually reach? Who benefits the most from your service, and also like who can actually pay you. That combination is what allows you to target in a really effective way. And I think when I wrote those white papers and consistently when I do this for companies, I try to get very clear on that first. Who is our actual target audience before?
Sorry. Is there, how should I put this? Like, is there, let's say, a process, especially when you're in high pressure situations where, let's say, there are 10 million things that are happening, right? A lot of the times I've seen this firsthand. They have a token launch, a testnet to a mainnet transition.
Yep.
And they need to fundraise. And they're also running programs that are targeting, let's say, at least 3 different audiences. When you're trying to build a cohesive narrative specifically, in midst of the madness that is happening with you, is there a process that's worked for you that you've seen for projects that you've worked with that, okay, if you tackle all of these challenges in this way, that becomes the common through line for all of your challenges that helps you move ahead in solving each of them?
It's a really good question. I guess let me make sure I understand it fully and what specifically you're speaking to. Are you talking about from an execution standpoint, how do you continue to do all these things, well while in the middle of things? Or are you saying how do you maintain consistent with the messaging throughout all those steps?
I guess a little bit of both. Just to be like crystal clear with that, what I'm trying to understand is when a founder has, let's say, 5 things that they're looking at, each one of them is going to require you building a common narrative that is going to be the overarching thing above all of the messaging that you're going to build below that, because each one of them is going to have a slightly different audience, right? With the token, you're trying to appeal to a different audience. With your mainnet, you're trying to appeal to a different audience. With like VCs, obviously, that's a slightly different audience. It's institutional.
Sure.
So when you have disparate audiences and you're trying to execute a narrative and a messaging that's going to be common, but also specific to each one of those, how do you balance this together?
That's a really good question. So I kind of mentioned earlier that, I usually try to take companies through that process of figuring out who their real target audience is, how they serve them. And I do try and do that as early as possible in order to save time and money, not pursuing the wrong thing. In that process of building both an understanding of your business and of yourself and how you help a target audience, you can also create that narrative, and within that narrative kind of ladder into specific audiences and how you help them. For me, it's typically who is like my most valuable audience right now at this stage of the company. So like for a layer 1 project, it's almost always at the beginning developers. It's always getting developers to build projects that will then attract users, right? If you don't have any projects, you have no product. That's consumer facing, right? But the cool thing about the specific audience is that who your highest value audience is does change throughout the stages of the company, right? Like I said, Stripe originally was like just solely developers, but now if you go to their website, it's like the best place to do business, right? It's like, very just generally small business SMB focused, right? And so you expand your audience. Same with Solana, right? You went from specifically like high performance chain, visionary developers who are really excited about that to performance for everyone and easy for developers, right? So that's kind of like the transition. And so how do you like maintain that messaging across all these different audiences, all these things you have to accomplish? Well, it really does help to have a core idea of like what you want in the long term. And that's like focus and discipline like toward that end goal. So who do you truly want to be helping? How do you want to be helping them? I keep coming back to that, but it is true. And then alongside that, it's like these other people that you help along the way, you have to have space and energy to want to help them. And so you craft specific messaging to them that fits into that narrative, but you never sacrifice the overarching narrative for the individuals along the way. Like you have to always be in service of the greater thing you're trying to accomplish, right? And the interesting thing about that is that it actually serves a little bit like the magnet analogy, where if you're willing to push some people away, you actually, or even just not even push them away, but to be controversial with them and to say, like, I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear in my messaging. I'm going to tell you what I actually care about and truly believe in. And if you can still get behind me anyway, then you're welcome to join. And that's similar to what we talked about earlier, which is that I don't try to convince any founder not to do something I want to do. I just educate them and let them choose for themselves. But if I'm diametrically opposed to it, then I just won't work with them. And thankfully, I've worked to a stage in my life where I don't have to work with bad people. And so what that comes down to essentially is that you message to people as it fits the broader messaging within that bucket, how it helps them. But if it's something that's not going to serve them, then you just tell them that. And you let them make a decision for, okay, maybe I didn't hear what I wanted to hear, but I believe in this project anyway, right? And if you are willing to say no to, telling people what they want to hear, but tell them what they actually need to hear, or tell them what's actually consistent and true and congruent to you, you'd be amazed how many people you think would have been, okay, well, they're just going to say no if I say this. And actually they're like, I actually really respect you said that because no one talks to me like that. And so that's the end goal here, is like the broader narrative and who you're here to serve and what you're trying to do. That's what gets people alongside with you, not like shape shifting your message to speak to each of these audiences.
I saw this really interesting tweet of everybody, there were 20 projects listed, and all of them were trying to build their own version of GM.
Okay.
Okay, and disclaimer, no shade to anybody, but G monad, G movement, G blah blah blah, so on and so forth. So everybody was trying to be unique. I think that was at least the intention. But it goes back to the point that you stated, right? Is that really unique? If you look at the audience that you're trying to target with a messaging like that, you're probably one of 25. You're not unique, right? Even though you're trying to build up a unique presence for yourselves. So that's really interesting. We've come to the end of this conversation, which I really don't want to end. I do have to ask, you've written close to 4,000 articles. I don't know, God knows how many interviews you've done till so far. But I do want to ask, if there was one interview, any person, dead or alive, that you could sit down and do an interview with, who would that be and why?
You did let me know that you might ask this question in passing, and I did not prepare an answer. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, because the thing that I actually think of immediately is actually this is the thing as a journalist, someone who's interviewed presidents and everyone in between, right? You very quickly have to kill the hero worship side of you. I don't get that way about people. And so it's not so much that. I think the person I'd like to interview, honestly, is my future self. I'd actually like to talk to that version of myself 20, 30 years from now. And the hard part about, kind of making a living, asking questions, and then falling down the rabbit holes that they create is that you think sometimes that you need to craft the perfect question. But I think it would be a mistake to ask my future self a question that I crafted. I think what I would just say is, what do I not know now that I really need to know? That, I could just sit here and come up with as many questions as I can, but the reality is I'm completely missing the point because I just haven't lived it yet, and I can't look back and realize it. And if that's the question I'd want to ask, and it's weird because there's actually an answer that comes to mind, maybe, if you don't mind me sharing it. I know that, yeah, okay. A couple of years ago, I was at Youth Denver, actually. I was a year or two into building scalable storytelling. I'd had a lot of good success, and I was finding myself in rooms I'd never been in before. I grew up very poor, and the oldest of 10 kids in a big crazy Catholic family, and a lot of trauma and a lot of drama, and probably made me the journalist I am and empathetic, curious person I am. I was at this conference and I got invited into this room full of these multi-millionaires who were maybe 20 or 30 years older than me, 50s or 60s, right? And I was asking them all these business questions. How do you grow the business? Or I have this challenge, or as an investor, like what would you be looking for? And I was like trying to learn from them. And they were really great. They gave me lots of good advice. But there was a moment when they said, these are all good questions, but the actual question you need to ask yourself is, what would be your perfect day? What would that look like? Who would you spend time with? What kind of problems would you be working on? Or what kind of things would you be doing? And then once you get really, really clear on what that day is, then how can you just build your business and your life around having as many of those days as possible with the time you have? And it's funny that like I say, yeah, I want to interview my future self and like, ask them what I'm missing. But in some ways, like those people I talked to who were very successful and older than me, I think the more I can get back to building my life around that day, which I think I've gotten pretty close to, but I also will say, I'll admit that I haven't gotten there yet. If I can build toward that day, I think I'll be very happy with it.
I was foolish enough to think that a storyteller will give me a straight answer. I think that's the perfect wrap up to honestly a conversation that I consider myself really lucky with the fact that I've been in this industry and I've gotten to interview or talk to people that like I'm sure an hour of your time is not worth like it's not free. Right. And it comes with a lot. And I'm just so lucky and so fortunate to be interviewing people like you and all the amazing guests I've had or I'm going to have. So, Nick, thank you so much for doing this, taking out the time, being patient, and giving honestly some of the most fascinating answers I've ever heard to honestly straight questions. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real honor. Just keep helping people and giving them more information, man. You're doing a really good thing here, and I'm thankful for it.
Awesome. Lovely. Anything that you would like to direct people to?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me at Nick Fouriezos on Twitter. My DMs are open, but like, feel free to message me if you have any questions or if I can help in any way. I'm really, I try to answer everybody. Can't do it all the time, but I definitely make an effort to. My website is scalablestorytelling.com, but to be honest, I'm pretty busy these days, and so I barely keep up with it. Yeah, there's nowhere I'd point people to except just feel free to reach out, and I'd love to help in any way that I can.
Awesome. Lovely. So that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. Stay tuned for more, follow for more, like, share, do the social media thing, and I hope to see you in the next episode. See you, and bye bye.